the Christmas doll. The winter air was biting that December, the kind that seeps into your bones and lingers long after you've shed your coat. My wife, Laura, and I had settled into our cozy home, nestled in the suburbs where the streets were lined with houses adorned in festive lights and wreaths. It was our third Christmas together, and while the holidays were always a joyous time, this year felt different, less vibrant, more subdued. Little did we know, a seemingly innocent gift would unravel the fabric of our peaceful life. Ellen, an old friend from college, had moved away years ago, her life taking her to distant cities and new adventures. We'd kept in touch sporadically, exchanging holiday cards and occasional emails, so when I received a package from her on Christmas Eve, I was pleasantly surprised. The box was wrapped in elegant paper, adorned with a deep red ribbon and a small, handwritten note. "Merry Christmas, dear friend. I hope this brings a smile to your home." Curiosity piqued. I brought the package inside and showed it to Laura. "It's beautiful," she said, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights. We carefully unwrapped the box, revealing an antique doll seated delicately in a handcrafted wooden cradle. The doll was dressed in a vintage Victorian-style dress, its porcelain face serene yet hauntingly lifelike. Its glassy blue eyes seemed to follow us, an unsettling presence that neither of us could ignore. "We should give it to Emma," Laura suggested, her voice tinged with both excitement and apprehension. Our daughter, 7-year-old Emma, had a soft spot for dolls, and I hoped it would become a cherished addition to her collection. That night, after tucking Emma into bed, Laura and I couldn't shake the unease that settled over us. The doll sat quietly in Emma's room, this presence almost too real, too silent. I tried to dismiss the feeling, attributing it to the stress of the holidays, but a nagging sense of dread lingered. Days turned into weeks, and subtle changes began to manifest. Emma, once lively and cheerful, became withdrawn, spending hours alone in her room. She'd sit motionless, staring blankly at the doll, whispering secrets to it that we couldn't hear. At first, we thought it was a phase, perhaps triggered by the new addition to her room. But as time went on, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. One evening, I returned home to find Emma asleep on the floor, the doll perched on her chest. Her normally rosy cheeks were pale, and her breathing was shallow. I gently shook her awake, concern etched on my face. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Emma stirred, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "It's watching me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It talks to me." Laura and I exchanged worried glances. That night, we decided to monitor Emma closely, hoping to understand what was happening. It wasn't long before the disturbances escalated. Objects in her room would move inexplicably, books falling from shelves, toys scattering across the floor. The doll, always the centerpiece, seemed to be at the heart of the chaos, its eyes glinting malevolently in the dim light. Laura suggested we research the doll's origins, hoping to uncover any clues that could explain the strange occurrences. Late one night, she stumbled upon an old newspaper article buried deep in the archives. The headline read, "Tragic Disappearance of Young Lily Turner." The article detailed the mysterious case of a 7-year-old girl who vanished without a trace on Christmas Eve 5 years prior. Her parents were devastated, and despite extensive searches, Lily was never found. Further reading revealed a chilling connection. The last item found in Lily's possession was an identical doll, much like the one we had received from Ellen. It was as if the doll was a conduit for something or someone, tragic and unresolved. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Laura and I decided to confront Ellen, hoping she could shed some light on the origin of the doll. When we reached out to her, Ellen's voice was strained, tinged with sorrow. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I found the doll at a thrift store, abandoned in a box with no information. I thought it was just a beautiful antique, something to bring warmth during the holidays." Her explanation did little to quell our fears. The connection between the doll and Lily Turner was undeniable. and we couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that something supernatural was at play. Emma's health began to deteriorate as well. Frequent headaches and a constant sense of fatigue plaguing her days. One cold December night, as snowflakes danced outside our windows, the true horror unfolded. Laura and I awoke to the sound of Emma screaming from her room. Rushing to her side, we found her wide-eyed and trembling, clutching the doll tightly to her chest. "It's not Lily," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "She's here." Before we could respond, the room plunged into darkness, the only light emanating from the doll's unblinking eyes. The temperature dropped sharply, our breaths visible in the frigid air. Shadows twisted and contorted around us, taking on sinister shapes that loomed menacingly. The whispers Emma had been mumbling turned into anguished cries, filling the room with a palpable sense of despair. Desperate to protect our daughter, Laura and I grabbed Emma and fled from the room, slamming the door behind us. But the house seemed to come alive with malevolent energy, doors slamming shut on their own, and the sound of footsteps echoing through the halls. It was as if the very walls were closing in, trapping us within a nightmare. Realizing we couldn't stay any longer, we decided to leave the house, hoping to escape the torment that had invaded our lives. As we drove away, the doll's image seemed to linger in the rearview mirror, its eyes following us until we reached the safety of the main road. The days that followed were a blur of police investigations and media attention. Detective Jameson took our case seriously. Intrigued by the strange circumstances surrounding Lily Turner's disappearance and the recent resurgence of similar phenomena, we relayed our experiences, sharing every detail about the doll and the eerie occurrences that plagued our home. Through Detective Jameson's connections, we discovered that Lily's family had moved out of town shortly after her disappearance, leaving behind all their possessions, including the very doll that had now found its way into our lives. It became clear that the doll was a focal point for Lily's restless spirit, a vessel for her untimely death and lingering anguish. Determined to put an end to the horror, we sought out a renowned paranormal investigator, Dr. Evelyn Hart. With her expertise, we hoped to exorcise the malevolent presence that had taken hold of our home and free Emma from the doll's sinister influence. Dr. Hart arrived with an array of equipment, her presence calm yet authoritative. She listened intently as we recounted our story, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding of the supernatural forces at play. "This doll is a conduit for Lily's spirit," she explained. "Her untimely death has left her soul trapped, unable to move on. The doll is her anchor, and it's been seeking closure. Together, we devised a plan to confront the entity and help Lily find peace." The night of the ritual was cold and unforgiving, the wind howling outside as if in response to the impending confrontation. We gathered in the living room, the doll placed at the center of a circle inscribed with protective symbols. Dr. Hart began the incantations, her voice steady as she called out to Lily's spirit. As the ritual progressed, the room grew colder, the shadows thickening with each passing moment. Emma stood beside us, her eyes locked on the doll, her presence both vulnerable and resolute. The whispers turned into cries, the air heavy with sorrow and desperation. Suddenly, the doll began to levitate, its porcelain face contorting into a mournful expression. A spectral figure materialized behind it, the ghostly image of Lily Turner, her eyes filled with longing and pain. "Help me," she pleaded, her voice echoing through the room. "I can't stay here." Dr. Hart intensified the chant, her words weaving a tapestry of hope and release. "Lily, your time here has ended. It's time to let go, to find peace." The spectral figure of Lily began to fade, her form dissolving into the ether as the ritual reached its peak. The temperature in the room normalized, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the last remnants of Lily's spirit were freed from the doll's grasp. The doll descended gently to the floor, its eyes now devoid of malevolence, reflecting only a sense of calm. Emma looked at it, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. her voice filled with relief. In the days that followed, the house returned to its former state of tranquility. The shadows no longer danced ominously, and the whispers ceased, leaving behind a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. Detective Jameson confirmed that the police had reopened Lily Turner's case, now with a renewed focus on uncovering the truth behind her disappearance. Laura and I decided to donate the doll to a local museum dedicated to unsolved mysteries and paranormal phenomena, hoping it would serve as a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the restless spirits that seek closure. As we watched the doll be carefully placed in its new home, a sense of relief washed over us, knowing that Lily's spirit had finally found peace. Emma began to thrive once more, her laughter filling the house with warmth and joy. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of happier times and the hope of new memories yet to be made. We continued to cherish our Christmas traditions, each year carrying the memory of that harrowing season and the strength we found in facing the unknown together. But sometimes, late at night, I catch a fleeting glimpse of a shadow in the corner of my eye, a reminder that the supernatural world is always just beyond our perception. It's a comforting thought, knowing that Lily is at peace, but it also serves as a cautionary tale about the mysteries that lie hidden within the seemingly ordinary gifts we receive. The Christmas doll taught us the importance of confronting the past, of seeking understanding and closure for those who can no longer find it themselves. It reminded us that the bonds of family and friendship extend beyond the physical world, reaching into the realms of the unseen and the unknown. And as long as we honor those connections, we can navigate the delicate balance between our world and the spirits that linger in the shadows. Stay vigilant, cherish your loved ones, and may your holidays be filled with light and peace, free from the shadows that seek to intrude. Story number 2. The Haunting Gift Box. Looking back, I still can't believe a simple Christmas gift could unravel my life so completely. It arrived on my doorstep on December 23rd. A late afternoon when the winter sky glowed pale and uncertain. There was no note, just my name, Clara, written in elegant cursive on a thick cream-colored tag. The box was small but beautifully adorned, deep green wrapping paper patterned with gilded pine cones and scarlet ribbons tied in an elaborate bow. I assumed it was from my closest friend, Ellen, who'd recently moved to a different city. We'd been exchanging gifts by mail for years. The thought of her smile and the warmth of old memories reassured me as I carried the box inside. I live alone in a quiet, older home that once belonged to my grandparents. The place was always comforting, with its worn hardwood floors, faded wallpaper, and the scent of old books lingering in the hallways. It was a house of memories, not nightmares. At least, it had been. I opened the box in my kitchen, expecting maybe a scented candle, a photograph in a frame, or some artisanal chocolates, something Ellen might have chosen. Instead, nestled in red tissue paper was a small, oval-shaped mirror with a tarnished silver frame. It looked old, and at first, I thought it was a family heirloom or an antique she'd found at one of those quaint shops she loved browsing. A bit odd, but I tried to appreciate its craftsmanship. The frame bore delicate engravings of flowers and twisting vines. The glass, though clean, seemed slightly off, like it captured the light in a too vivid way. When I raised it to eye level, my reflection stared back with unsettling sharpness. My hair, my eyes, my winter-pale face, all as expected. But then, something in the background caught my eye. Behind me, reflected in the dim space of my own living room, stood a figure. My heart skipped. I turned around instantly, but I was alone. The sofa, the coffee table, the old grandfather clock, all where they should be. No intruder lurking. I turned back to the mirror and saw only myself this time. It must have been a trick of the light, I thought. Maybe a shadow cast by a passing car's headlights. I set the mirror aside, trying to ignore the lingering unease curling in my stomach. That night, I decided not to call Ellen and thank her just yet. I wanted to shake off the strange feeling first. The nightmares began that very night. Nothing too dramatic at first, just unsettling dreams of walking down my hallway only to find doors slightly ajar, or hearing whispers from empty rooms. I woke up drenched in sweat, blaming the stress of the holidays. As Christmas approached, the atmosphere in my home thickened with dread. I began to sense movement in my peripheral vision, shadows shifting, corners growing darker than they should. Sometimes I heard faint tapping on the walls. More than once, I caught a glimpse of that strange figure in the mirror, always behind me, never clear enough to make out distinct features, just a vague, human-like silhouette standing too close. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but as the days wore on, the phenomena intensified. My dining chair would scrape the floor when I wasn't touching it. Doors creaked open at odd hours. A wine glass I'd left on the kitchen counter shattered spontaneously, sending shards skittering across the floor. Worst of all, the mirror began appearing in places I hadn't left it. On my bedroom dresser, at the foot of the staircase, once propped against the bathroom sink. Each time I was sure I'd stored it away in a drawer or a box in the attic, trying to hide it from sight, but it wouldn't stay hidden. When I finally called Ellen a week later, my voice was tight with anxiety. She sounded puzzled. "Clara, I'm sorry. I never sent you a mirror," she said, genuine confusion lacing her words. "I was going to mail your gift next week, after I got back from visiting my family. Maybe someone else sent it." That revelation sent a cold bolt of fear straight through me. Who, then, had left this so-called gift at my door? And why? Desperate, I tried to rid myself of the mirror. I wrapped it in layers of newspaper and shoved it in the trash bin outside. But the next morning it lay on my kitchen table, newspaper strewn around it, as if torn apart by unseen hands. I attempted more drastic measures, throwing it into a donation box and dropping it off at a thrift store miles away. By evening, it was back, sitting in the middle of my living room floor. I even tried smashing it with a hammer, but the glass refused to break. The metal frame barely dented the hammer's surface. It was indestructible, and I understood then that I was dealing with something far beyond my comprehension. The presence in the house grew bolder. At night, I heard someone walking upstairs when I knew I was alone. I saw doorknobs turning slowly, as if by invisible hands. My reflection in the mirror began to distort. My eyes would look hollow, my mouth twisted into a grimace. And behind me, that figure stood clearer now, a tall shape draped in darkness, leaning closer each time I dared to glance. I could almost feel its breath on my neck, smell its rancid odor. I tried to research the mirror's origin, scouring the internet for tales of cursed objects. It sounded absurd, but I was past the point of caring how this looked. I found references in obscure forums to haunted mirrors, objects that served as gateways for malevolent entities. A few mentioned a ritual to banish whatever lurked behind the glass. Salt, fire, cleansing with sage, typical folklore remedies. I attempted them all. I scattered salt around my home, lit sage sticks until my eyes watered, whispered prayers I hadn't uttered since childhood. The figure only grew stronger, more present. I started seeing it even without the mirror. A faint outline standing at the end of the hallway, a silhouette hovering behind my couch as I watched television, a reflection in the window at night. Soon, my home felt less like a refuge and more like a trap. I slept fitfully, if at all. When I dared to sleep, I woke up gasping, convinced I'd felt cold hands pressing on my shoulders, long nails scraping at my scalp. I spoke to a priest, who listened kindly but offered no real solutions beyond holy water and prayer. I tried a psychic, who refused to enter my house after stepping onto the porch. She claimed the energy inside was too dark, too hostile. Finally, I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. The house that once felt safe and comforting now felt like a prison inhabited by something predatory. The morning I chose to leave for good, I took nothing but essentials, a suitcase of clothes, my documents, and my laptop. As I walked to the front door, I heard a low growl, a guttural sound that vibrated through my bones. The mirror lay on the floor by the threshold, blocking my way. its surface flickered, and for a moment, I saw not just the figure but the outline of a gaunt face, sunken eyes, a grin too wide. It reached out a shadowy hand that seemed to push against the glass from the inside. My heart hammered. I kicked the mirror aside, not caring if it scratched the floor. There was a hiss, like steam escaping a pipe, and the lights flickered overhead. Grabbing my suitcase, I fled into the cold morning air. I slammed the door behind me, swearing I'd never set foot in that house again. I didn't look back at the windows. I couldn't bear to see if something peered out at me from behind the curtains. I found a motel room a few towns over and stayed there for a while, trying to gather my thoughts and my courage. I contacted a realtor the next week, arranging to sell the house. The realtor asked if I'd like to remove my belongings first, but I made an excuse. Let the house and everything in it go. I'd start anew. Weeks have passed, and I haven't spoken about this to anyone but Ellen, who listened with shock and disbelief. My story sounds insane, I know, yet I can't deny what I witnessed in that old home. Sometimes at night, I wake up fearing the mirror found me again, that I'll open my eyes and see it leaning against the wall of my motel room, that distorted figure waiting to return to my life. But it hasn't shown up, at least not yet. I feel freer now, yet still haunted by memory. In quiet moments, when the heater hums softly and the wind rattles the windows, I remember my reflection twisted in that damned mirror, the phantom lurking just behind me. I think about the house I left behind, and the strange gift no one admitted sending. I don't know who sent it, or why. Perhaps it was a warning, or a cruel joke. Perhaps that entity had chosen me for reasons I'll never understand. Whatever it was, I learned that not all gifts are blessings, and that some presents carry with them the weight of unseen worlds, hungry and waiting to seep into our own. I've moved on, or at least I'm trying to, but the memory remains. I keep a plain, modern mirror by my bed now, small and new, its edges polished to a shine. Before I turn off the lights each night, I glance into it carefully. My reflection is normal these days, just tired eyes and worry lines. No dark silhouette behind me. Still, I watch closely, listening to the silence, never quite sure if I'm truly alone. Story number 3. The Haunting Threads. December 15th brought a quiet stillness to our town, the kind that blankets everything in anticipation of the holidays. My grandmother, Rose, had always been the cornerstone of our family's Christmas celebrations. Her home was a sanctuary filled with the warmth of countless memories, each corner echoing with laughter and love. This year, however, her presence felt more precious than ever. Arthritis had slowed her down, but her spirit remained unbroken as she knitted scarves and hats for each of us with unwavering dedication. When Rose handed me the package, her hands trembled slightly, betraying the effort it took to wrap the thick woolen coat. The wrapping paper was adorned with delicate floral patterns, a testament to her meticulous nature. "Happy early Christmas, dear," she said softly. "I thought you might like something special." Unwrapping the package revealed an old, hand-knitted coat. The wool was thick and warm, dyed in rich reds and deep greens that seemed to capture the essence of the holiday season. Each stitch was perfect, the craftsmanship undeniable. I couldn't help but admire how the coat hugged my frame, its weight both comforting and substantial. "It's beautiful, Grandma," I whispered, feeling a surge of gratitude. The next day, the weather had turned colder, the first snowflakes of the season beginning to fall. I decided to wear the coat, appreciating its snug fit and the way it shielded me from the biting wind. As I zipped it up, a sense of nostalgia washed over me, memories of past Christmases flickering in my mind. Little did I know, this coat would soon become the source of an unsettling series of events. That night, as I settled into bed, the house was enveloped in silence. The only sounds were the faint ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional creak of the old wood. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different, an inexplicable tension in the air, pulling the covers tighter around me. I tried to ignore the unease creeping up my spine, Midnight brought with it a sudden chill, colder than the winter air outside. I glanced around my room, the shadows cast by the moonlight stretching long and distorted across the walls. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, and for a moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A fleeting shadow, darker than the night itself, standing just behind me, heart pounding. I turned swiftly, but the room was empty, shaking off the fear. I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, perhaps a shadow cast by passing cars. The next morning, I woke up feeling unusually restless. The coat seemed to cling tighter, its fabric colder against my skin than before. As I moved through the house, small things felt slightly out of place. Books that hadn't been on the shelf, a misplaced picture frame. At first, I dismissed them as the result of my own disorganization. But the disturbances grew more frequent and unsettling. One evening, while preparing dinner, I noticed the coat lying on the back of my chair, though I distinctly remember hanging it in the closet. The room felt inexplicably colder as I approached, and the shadows seemed to dance with a life of their own. Unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. I decided to set the coat aside, hoping to shake off the lingering dread. Days passed, and the strange occurrences intensified. Objects moved on their own. Doors creaked open without reason, and an oppressive feeling of being watched settled over me, especially during the late hours of the night. The shadows no longer just moved, they seemed to reach out, almost touching me with their dark tendrils. I began to hear faint whispers, barely audible but filled with sorrow and desperation. Determined to understand what was happening, I began researching the history of the coat. I visited the local library, poring over old records and newspaper archives. That's when I stumbled upon a series of articles about Rose's grandmother, Eleanor. The stories were fragmented, shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Eleanor had lived in an old house on Maple Street before moving in with Rose. That house was infamous for a string of unsolved murders and eerie occurrences that left the community on edge. One article detailed Eleanor's final days. It spoke of her struggles with loneliness and depression, how the old house seemed to close in on her, trapping her in a web of despair. On Christmas Eve, much like the night Eleanor vanished, strange noises and apparitions plagued the household. Neighbors reported seeing ghostly figures and hearing anguished cries echoing through the halls. Eleanor disappeared without a trace, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and an unfinished coat. Realizing the connection between the coat and Eleanor's tragic story, I felt a deep sense of responsibility. It was as if the very threads of the garment were woven with Eleanor's pain, binding her restless spirit to my own. Determined to free both of us from this torment, I sought out every piece of information I could find about Eleanor's life and the haunting that plagued her final home. One night, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. "Help me," they seemed to plead. I knew I had to confront the source of the haunting. Gathering my courage, I returned to the old house on Maple Street, now abandoned and left to decay. The building loomed before me, its windows shattered, the once vibrant garden now overgrown with weeds. Pushing open the creaking door, I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of mold and neglect. The interior was a ghost of its former self, furniture covered in dust, and the remnants of Eleanor's life scattered about. I made my way to the attic, where I believed the key to unlocking the mystery lay hidden. Among the clutter, I found Eleanor's journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. Flipping through it, I discovered entries detailing her descent into madness, her inability to escape the shadows that haunted her, and her desperate attempts to find peace. One entry stood out. "The coat binds me. It holds my sorrow, my regrets. If only someone can finish what I started, perhaps I can find peace." Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the significance of the coat Rose had given me. It was more than just a garment. It was a conduit for Eleanor's lingering anguish. Returning home, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't bear the weight of Eleanor's sorrow any longer, and I needed to help her find the closure she so desperately sought. I began by creating a ritual to honor Eleanor's memory, gathering candles, incense, and items that represented her life. I set up a space in the living room, placing the coat at the center, surrounded by symbols of peace and remembrance. As the sun set on Christmas Eve, I performed the ritual, chanting words of healing and release. The room grew colder, and the shadows thickened, swirling around me with a menacing presence. The whispers returned, louder and more desperate. "Finish it, please." Undeterred, I focused on my intention, pouring all my empathy and understanding into the ceremony. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, and the coat began to shimmer with a soft, ethereal light. Eleanor's presence became tangible, her sorrowful eyes meeting mine with a mix of hope and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice a soothing balm amidst the chaos. The shadows recoiled, dissipating into the corners of the room as the light from the coat grew brighter. A sense of peace settled over me, the oppressive atmosphere lifting entirely. The coat no longer felt like a burden but a symbol of connection and healing. In the days that followed, the disturbances ceased completely. The house felt lighter, the shadows banished, and the whispers silenced. I kept the coat, now imbued with a sense of purpose and serenity, as a reminder of the journey I had undertaken and the peace I had helped restore. Life gradually returned to normal, but the experience left an indelible mark on me. I became more attuned to the unseen forces that linger just beyond our perception, and I developed a deep respect for the stories and souls that intertwine with our own. Every Christmas since, I wear the coat, honoring the legacy of Eleanor and the love that bound our family together through generations. Final thoughts. Honoring the past and the unseen connections we share with those who came before us can bring closure and peace, not just for the restless spirits but for ourselves as well. Gifts, especially those with deep personal histories, carry more than just sentimental value. They hold the essence of lives once lived, their joys and sorrows woven into the fabric of our existence. By acknowledging and respecting these connections, we can ensure that both the living and the departed find the harmony they seek. Cherish your loved ones. Respect the stories behind the gifts you receive. And may your holidays be filled with warmth, love, and peace, free from the shadows that seek to intrude.